The year was 1863, and the United States of America was torn apart by the Civil War, a brutal conflict that pitted brother against brother. It was a time of immense hardship, sacrifice, and heroism. Amid the chaos and destruction, one story of courage and resilience stood out, that of Private Nathaniel Harper, a farmer-turned-soldier from the rolling hills of Pennsylvania. Nathaniel, or Nate as his friends called him, was a simple man with little interest in politics. His life revolved around his farm, his wife Clara, and their young daughter Lily. But as the war escalated, the call to duty became impossible to ignore. The Union needed men to fight for the cause of liberty and the preservation of the nation. Reluctantly, Nate left behind his plow and picked up a musket, joining the 123rd Pennsylvania Volunteer Infantry. By the summer of 1863, Nate's regiment had seen its fair share of skirmishes and hardships. The men were weary, their spirits dampened by the endless marches, scant rations, and the ever-present specter of death. Yet they pressed on, driven by the hope of reuniting the fractured nation. Their journey led them to Gettysburg, a small town in Pennsylvania that would soon become the site of one of the most pivotal battles in American history. As Nate and his comrades arrived, the air was thick with tension. The Confederate Army, under General Robert E. Lee, was advancing northward, and the Union forces were determined to stop them. The battle began on July 1, 1863. Nate found himself positioned on Cemetery Hill, a critical vantage point for the Union Army. The ground trembled with the thunder of artillery, and the sky was filled with smoke and the cries of men. For 3 days, the fighting raged on, each side determined to gain the upper hand. On the second day of battle, Nate's regiment was ordered to hold their position at all costs. The Confederates launched a ferocious assault, their gray uniforms blending with the smoke as they charged up the hill. Nate's hands trembled as he loaded his musket, his heart pounding like a drum. He thought of Clara and Lily, drawing strength from the image of their faces. Amid the chaos, Nate noticed a young drummer boy lying injured on the battlefield. The boy, no older than 14, clutched his drum as tears streamed down his face. Without hesitation, Nate rushed to his side, dragging him to safety behind a line of rocks. "Stay here, son," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You'll make it through this." As the sun set on the second day, the Union lines held strong. But the cost was staggering. Nate's regiment had suffered heavy losses, and the faces of his fallen comrades haunted him. Yet there was no time to grieve. The next day would bring the climax of the battle. July 3, 1863, dawned with an eerie calm. Nate and his comrades prepared for what they knew would be a decisive moment. Around midday, the Confederate Army launched Pickett's Charge, a massive assault aimed at breaking the Union lines. Thousands of Confederate soldiers marched across an open field, straight into the teeth of Union artillery and musket fire. Nate's position on Cemetery Hill gave him a clear view of the carnage. He fired his musket again and again, each shot a desperate attempt to stem the tide. The ground shook as cannonballs exploded, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder. Through it all, Nate remained steadfast, a silent sentinel amid the storm. When the smoke cleared, the Confederate assault had been repelled. The Union lines held, and the Battle of Gettysburg was won. Nate collapsed to his knees, his body exhausted and his mind numb from the horrors he had witnessed. Yet, he knew that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The tide of the war had turned, and hope was rekindled. In the days following the battle, Nate helped bury the dead and tend to the wounded. He found the young drummer boy he had saved, now recovering in a field hospital. The boy's name was Samuel, and he thanked Nate with tears in his eyes. "You saved my life, sir," he said. "I'll never forget you." When Nate finally returned home at the end of the war, he was a changed man. The farm, Clara, and Lily were still there, but the scars of battle ran deep. Yet, he carried with him a profound sense of purpose. He had fought not just for his family, but for the ideals of freedom and unity. Years later, as an old man, Nate would visit the Gettysburg battlefield, now a place of reflection and remembrance. Standing on Cemetery Hill, he gazed out over the rolling fields, his mind filled with memories of that fateful time. He knew that the sacrifices made there had shaped the destiny of a nation. Nate Harper's story, like countless others from the Civil War, is a testament to the resilience and courage of ordinary people in extraordinary times. It reminds us that even in the darkest hours, the human spirit can endure and prevail. This version has been condensed to approximately 900 words.